Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this video I want to talk about some of the newer operators. These are not so new anymore. They were theoretically added to the JavaScript spec in 2019, I'm pretty sure, but they weren't really fully implemented until like recently. So like more recent versions of Node, you're able to use them. And so I wanted to, because I was looking at like the compatibility of different features in Node, because I really wanted to see if like decorators were finally added in recent versions. Still no decorators. I mean, I can use Babel, but I'd just like to be able to like use decorators eventually someday. I guess I can always use them in like Python or TypeScript. Um, but anyways, so just to show you, I have this version of Node. It should be the latest version of Node as I'm recording. Okay, and again, if you ever want to update your node, what you would want to do is just first install this library. So npm install. You want to install it globally -g n. N is the name of the library. What it does is just updates your node. Okay, and then once you've installed that library, you would just do npm n latest, and this would update your node to the latest version. Okay, so I haven't done this in a while, so like a couple weeks. So let me do it now, in case there is some new version I'm not aware of. So sudo, actually, yeah, it would just be sudo n latest, because you gotta use. I'm on Linux, so I gotta have the root privileges. So let's see here. It'll tell me if it's up to date or not. Okay, and yeah, okay, good. I'm to the latest. Good. Okay. Now what I want to show you is a couple operators. So again, if these do not work on your node, it's because you need to upgrade. Okay, so if you have a version like 10 or something, these are not going to be available in there. Okay, so first let's just talk about the problem. So let's say I have this const my object. Okay, and my object equals an empty object. Now generally you can console log any property of that object. So let's say I were to, or access any property of that object. So if I were to access my obj.cheese, okay, let's do node scratch.js. See, I get undefined because I never defined what cheese is. I never, in this object, I never say what is cheese. But cheese is not an object, so cheese doesn't have properties. So if I were to try to go a level deeper and say cheese.gouda, okay, now I'm trying to access a property, and when you access a property, you expect that you're accessing a property of an object. But cheese is not an object. Cheese is undefined. So it's going to throw me an error. Okay, cannot read property of Gouda. Or cannot read property Gouda of undefined, because the undefined is what's inside cheese. Undefined is not an object, so it cannot have properties. So since cheese is undefined, you're confusing the interpreter, being like, how can I access a property of a non-object? Okay. So in the past, what you had to do to prevent these kind of errors is you'd have to use all sorts of ternary operators. You'd have to use something like this. You'd have to be like my obj, dot cheese. You'd first check to see if cheese exists using a ternary operator and say, okay, well, if my cheese dot exists, then try to access Gouda. If not, then just say no cheese. Okay. So then what would happen is that if cheese was undefined, this would then resolve as false. So it would do no cheese instead of trying to access this particular property. If you've done a lot of React, you've probably run into this a whole lot. And your code is filled with ternary operators everywhere. Okay? But now with optional chaining, life's a lot easier. Okay? So now what I do is I can put these little question marks there. Okay? Which means only access of it if it exists. So it's like question mark period. Now let's see if I only put it on cheese, does it work? No, scratch.js. Still no, because I need it on both. I just need to check to see if Gouda exists. So if I do that, let's see what happens. And see, I get undefined. Okay, because it says this property may or may not exist. This is it's actually like the way I'd imagine this is implemented is that it's literally just a ternary operator. That same sort of operation built into sort of your conjoining accessor. Okay, cool. So now I don't have to set up all those ternary operators. This is going to make my React code a lot cleaner. Okay, although I'm assuming it's going to need like, the latest version of Babel, which I'm sure it, I'm sure all these libraries have been up to date by now. The other thing is Nullish Coalescence. So that was optional chaining. This is so once upon a time, if you want to give a default value, so say const cheese, I want to say the value is the value of a value called food. So this we had a variable called food, but what if food wasn't defined? Like it, because right now I haven't defined food. So I would use or, and I would say okay, or Gouda. So that way, if food doesn't exist, like if the variable food has no value, then it would assign the value of Gouda. Okay, and that if I were the console log cheese, it should give me Gouda. Okay, well, first I have to define food. So we'll just do let food. And see, I get Gouda. But if I define a food, so I say food equals Munster, then it'll equal Munster, because food does then have a value. Now this is fine unless you were doing something like, what is food is 0? What if I actually wanted to assign the value of 0? Well, 0 is going to resolve as false. So it's still going to assign Gouda. Okay, so see, it still gives me Gouda because 0 equals false. There's times where you actually wanted to assign the value of 0. So that could be a problem because you're going to end up with the default value. So they created this. So this does the same thing as using or, except now if I were to assign 0, it'll actually assign 0. Okay, now it's only going to care if this is like undefined or null. So then if I do this again, and it's undefined, it still works the same way, but now if I did want to assign this value of 0, I can. So those are two sort of newer features. You can now use them in Node. I don't think you can use them in the browser still, but that's what Babel's for. But so for your React purposes, as long as you got, you're using like Create React App or one of my templates, you should be able to use these features and have fun and do all sorts of cool, fun stuff. So I just want to kind of share that real quick. I've done videos on these features before, but I think I did them using like TypeScript because they weren't necessarily implemented in Node yet. So now that they are implemented in Node, I can give you a better example. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.